First of all, welcome everybody. My name is Christopher Schneeberger. I am the current board president of Perspective Gallery. And Perspective Gallery is a not-for-profit, community-oriented cooperative whose purpose is to promote fine art photography. In addition to monthly group and featured artist exhibitions, the gallery features a lecture series called Perspectives on Photography, monthly artist talks, of which this is one, an annual international juried exhibition called Lens, an annual invitational show based around a theme, usually featuring the work of prominent Chicago region photographers, and also our annual Vicinity exhibition, which is a more closely regional juried exhibition. We also have a show, an annual show, juried show for high school students of the area. And I'll read you just briefly our mission statement. Perspective Group and Photography Gallery is a 501c3 organization promoting the art of photography to the public with exhibitions, lectures, classes, and outreach while creating a dynamic and diverse community of photographers who share ideas and inspiration. And I'll mention that also we represent the work of approximately 20 member artists around the North Shore and Chicago area. I am one, Nelson is one of them, and a number of other people joining us are members of the gallery. I'm going to take over your screen and show you stuff about our gallery. This is our website and newly launched, revised website. You can see our current and upcoming exhibitions. Next month, we have a show by the Chicago Alliance of African American Photographers called We Matter. Looking forward to that. That will also have an artist discussion. We have just turned 10 years old as a gallery, as an organization, and in celebration of that, we have released a 10-year anniversary book that brings together the work of all current and many of our former members, 34 gallery member artists, both past and present, with introductions by board member William Bridges and also one of our advisory board members, Jeffrey Wolin, who's a fairly renowned photographer you may know the work of. I don't know if Jorg is on the call. If you are, Jorg, tell us if we have any upcoming order dates, because occasionally we offer this book for a lower price if we get a bunch of orders together. So if you're interested, let us know. And if you go to our website, you can see the work of all of our current member artists listed on here. Having said that, I'm going to stop the share and introduce our photographer for the artist discussion tonight. Alexa Frangos is a Chicago-based artist. She studied visual communications and photography at Washington University in St. Louis before receiving her MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where her multimedia work focused on representations of women in film. Her current work consists of photographs and collages that reference narrative, domestic life, self-portraiture, and early cinema, which we're focusing on this evening. Alexa is also, as you know, is a member of Perspective Group and Photography Gallery here in Evanston. Some recent exhibitions include Blue Mountain Gallery in New York City, Midwest Center for Photography in Wichita, Kansas, Shockbox Gallery in Hermosa Beach, California, and Lightbox Photographic Gallery in Astoria, Oregon. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alexa Frangos.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I have a short video that I will share. Bear with me. I have done this, but I'm still slow at it. Oh, no, I'm doing it wrong.
There we go.
No, wait, I'm supposed to share desktop though, correct? That's the best way to do it. Okay. Give me a moment. Here we go. I wanted to, I know that's very short. I'm not a videographer, but I wanted to thank Jorg Metzner. He shot some wonderful images of the installation, which was very helpful. But now I'm just going to show some of the images in the show individually. Oh, and I'm going to stop right here. Actually, no, I shouldn't stop sharing. I apologize. I'm going to continue sharing, but I wanted to stop at that one image. Chris had mentioned it might be nice for me to actually include an image that kind of shows my process. And that was one that I had that I thought was a little bit instructive. If I can just get it open. No, I don't want Photoshop. Let's see if this works though, if I can open that image. Get out of here. Oh, why does it keep doing that? Well, hopefully I can enlarge it and go through the slideshow one more time. Actually, that might be a good thing to do, because what I wanted to talk about is sort of how this, oh, here we go. That'll be helpful. But I'll start with sort of where this project started. I'd say that this has been sort of living inside my mind for, and I'm not exaggerating, for more than 20 years. But then over the last 5 years, I finally decided to get it out of my system and sort of give birth to it. And it's probably fairly obvious from looking at these images that movies have been important to my life, especially my young life. I grew up in a house where my parents were real lovers of classic cinema and very big cinephiles. I think we owned a Betamax the day they came out. And they were showing me films that probably were inappropriate for me to see at a young age, Chinatown, things like that. But it became very important as I grew up, the ritual of going to the movies, the sitting down in a dark theater, knowing I would enter a place where I would lose myself. And I became, I guess you could say I became a cinephile, but I don't want to create the impression that I'm one of these people with an encyclopedic, knowledge of film. That's not me. Really more my obsession, I would say, is sort of the experience of movies, and specifically celluloid cinema, I guess, because I had this idea growing up that I would be a projectionist. That was my backup plan of just making art. I would make art and I would be a projectionist. I loved the idea, the sort of tactile nature of film and the sort of the manual editing of it. And just, I would go to the movies and I would constantly be looking up at the projectionist booth and look for those little cigarette burns in the corner that show the sort of when the new reel should be starting. And so that was sort of my obsession. I, of course, quickly found out that, at the time, the projectionist union was sort of very difficult to get into. So that dream sort of fell by the wayside. But in any case, I read a book a long time ago. It was a book called The Phantom Empire by Jeffrey O'Brien. And I want to read just a quote from it because that was really what kind of sparked my thoughts on how to make these images. The book is a wonderful book. I recommend it to anybody who loves movies because it's really, Jeffrey O'Brien is a poet, and it's a very specific and unusual book that is really more about sort of the collective experience of going to the movies and how it sort of impacted the 20th century consciousness. And it's really more a meditation than, sort of a critical look at movies. But I'm going to read this, and this sort of is where the images sort of began. And it's a quote from the book. Across the screen's shimmering surface floated a circus of elements, among which the eye moved like a swimmer. They appeared, they shifted, they reassembled in different shapes and colors. The thousands of celluloid beings who inhabited movies were like wind-up toys that would run for eternity. At night, in the dark, the disembodied creatures swarmed in the mind, indestructible. So that was really, I sort of grasped onto that, and I said, that is something that's really impacted me, and that sort of idea. And collage, which I've been doing forever, really seems suited to this idea of the project. And specifically to film, where there are these sort of weird juxtapositions, sort of jumps across time and space, but then also the idea of the sort of tactile physical form of the medium, especially at, at the time that I was, going to the movies a lot. And the idea that I really wanted to photograph these collages because, well, first of all, I could light them and create that sort of cinematic world. I have more control over it. But I also sort of believe that the camera lens transforms what is photographed. And for me, that really worked towards this project and the idea of connecting it to film. I chose initially to, and so this image right here that I'm showing, a lot of people when they see the images, they think that possibly they're created digitally, but they're really not. I'm sort of taking these mini diorama-like scenes, and I'm lighting them in a specific way and photographing them. And I started out wanting to, and the reason that the show is called Zoetrope, as I started out wanting to, and I think I'll stop sharing my screen because I want to, if people don't know what a zoetrope is, I have a handy dandy little visual. This is one of these early non-film devices. This is in case anybody has any familiarity. It's this sort of cylinder that a strip is placed into, usually one of these kind of strips, and there are slits cut in it, and it spins, and it was sort of an early animation device. And I decided that I wanted to create, inspired by Jeffrey O'Brien's words, a sort of shimmering screen with all these sort of disembodied wind-up toys, film images in my head. I wanted to create, as best as I could, a sort of continuous strip, similar to a zoetrope, a continuous strip collage. And I did that, and then I'll share my screen again, and then in typical fashion like me, I did a number of pieces like that, and those are the pieces that run on this one continuous wall of the gallery. But then I typically get bored with whatever confines I'm doing in a project, so I began to sort of break free from that. And I created this image here that I have highlighted that I saw in a dream of these eyeballs in a theater with sort of Busby Berkeley carpet. And I also did some photograms. These two images here that I've highlighted were some photograms I made of images from film that are that were copied onto vellum, and then actually taking film strips and parts of clocks and things like that, and just creating photograms. So I always like to play, but really the original idea was to try to create, as best as I could, this sort of continuous collage strip. And I don't know if I'm done. I'm still making these, but this is where I am with the work right now. And I can show the slideshow again. I can show the film again. Let me know if you have an opinion, Chris, if any of that would be.
Yeah, Alexa, I would love
great.
if you would run through the images again. Maybe you could discuss with each one maybe a little bit of the inspiration or what some of the individual elements you chose, what the significance might be.
Sure.
You know, without giving us.
I don't like to.
Don't want to take away the mystery, of course, but.
I know. I generally like people to kind of come at it in their own way, but I'm happy to sort of talk a bit about a few of them. And obviously, I think looking at some of these, there's this sort of idea of editing and then the sort of physical manipulation of bodies. This one specifically, maybe I can pause it. This one specifically is about something very, very sort of matter of fact. One of the first movies I saw that really scared me was, one of my mom's favorite movies, was the Frank Langella Dracula from the 70s. And they probably had that on. Again, I was seeing movies that were wildly inappropriate when I was, 10 years old. And I would see the images from this movie and I would just be convinced that these vampires were living under my bed. So I kind of wanted to create something that was about that moment in my life, but hopefully it's about more than that.
Can I ask a question about this image?
Of course.
So is this completely two-dimensional? Like, is it just flat?
No, no. And I was hoping that I didn't have a lot of outtakes, but no, this has depth to it. I would say it's got about 10 inches of depth. That string that I've strung from, and that's probably pulled out about 10 inches from the flat images. So there is a two-dimensional, behind the string, that is two-dimensional. And then I have the figure in the bed is probably about 5 inches in front of that. And then the string is about, I would say maybe 7 to 10 inches in front of that. It does flatten when you photograph it, and that's part of the challenge of making these images, but I do like to light them to create that drama and to give them some dimensionality.
And Alexa, if I can talk about something that we discussed when I hung your show and we were looking at the work, I think to people looking at this in this era with Photoshop, with all kinds of photo manipulation tools, one might kind of quickly assume that these are collaged digitally, but these are all, if I'm not mistaken, photographed as like one single shot. Everything that we see in each image was in front of the camera at that moment, yes?
Yes, there is no Photoshop in that way. I may have, darkened a bit here and there. And frankly, the most I did in Photoshop was to remove a lot of dust, because these are shot medium format, and it picks up every speck of dust in my house, these constructions. So I got rid of a lot of dust in Photoshop, but that was probably that.
So I'm just confused still a little bit. So like this image, this is in the gallery, it's a photograph of this.
It is a photograph, yes.
Okay, so the photograph is just a flat photograph that we see in the gallery of a 3D construction. Okay, got you.
Exactly. Sorry if I answered.
No, that's okay. No, I love that I don't know exactly what I'm seeing. Plus, I'm seeing a photograph of the photograph because this is a Zoom lecture, so it's totally confusing.
Hey, Alexa? I think we're kind of rolling into a Q&A here, which is great.
Okay, sure.
I've got a couple of questions, and feel free to keep showing some of the images as we talk, but I'm kind of curious to know a little bit about your work process, one of which is with the kind of collage elements where we see bits of photography referencing cinema. What is your source material? Where are you finding these pieces? I mean, some of them are quite iconic from films. I saw Metropolis in there, a few others I recognize. How do you find your source material?
Well, I started by wanting to only do my own screenshots, and I've done that with a number of them. So literally, I'm watching a movie on. It seems to work on some DVDs and not others. It doesn't work on streaming services. So I'm literally taking screenshots from films. And if I technically wasn't able to do that, I am doing a Google search of, I have this image from a film in my head, I can't find, I'm not able to screenshot it, so I'm gonna just Google it. Some of the images are actually from film strips, so they're not necessarily from iconic films, but there's a lot of sort of vintage, like this one on the top, that's an old film strip. I didn't want to go too heavy on the really iconic film imagery, because again, that was kind of entering the realm of, I don't know, fan art or something, and I definitely wanted to reference certain films that are very sort of indelibly fused into my brain, but I wanted it to be more about the, really trying to make it be cinematic. So what is inherent to cinema? So, you know, time, space, rhythms and patterns of editing, close-ups, you know, that sort of thing. So if I could find, and actually that last one, I don't know how to go back here, of the repeated image of Carole Lombard, that's actually from an old, I love Carole Lombard, and that's from an old Carole Lombard fan magazine, that I had that was just a photograph of her. So, and in this image, there's a lot of photographs I took myself of certain objects that I have, and obviously this one is not collage.
And roughly what's the balance there? I know you had to take some of the images are original. What's the balance of original to found?
Oh gosh, I would say it's majority found. Majority found. Yeah, I mean, obviously you can, if you look at them, you can see I've inserted some objects. So obviously the objects are in the construction, like the scissors or the measuring tape here, or these sort of dolls I found that reminded me of Rocky. Those are actual objects that I'm putting into the construction that I'm photographing.
And is there intent there with the balance? Like, were you trying to make it all found or mostly found, or was it just
I was
whatever's
trying
the best
to make it mostly found, and if I was photographing anything, I wanted it to be. I really started out just in my head, just being images of films. Anything that I'm inserting that's not from a film has to be. It has to go through that process of, is this really giving that, creating that world for me? So there's not a lot of that. Like, for instance, in this one, I mean, I went as far as to, it's opening in Photoshop. I went as far as to, give me a minute here, it should open. That sort of burst behind her repeated faces, that's actually a backdrop from a film. So, and obviously the lilies are from my garden, and the little starburst, little metal objects there are clock gears, but really, and then that circular thing on the upper right, that's supposed to sort of recall a cigarette burn from film, but that's sort of got, if you can see, it's sort of images of Clark Gable that have been strung together into a circle.
I'm just going to jump in here for a second and encourage everyone. Please feel free to use the chat to put in questions, and I can pick them up. And one of those questions that Yvette Meltzer has asked is, can you say more about the chemograms? You place the objects on the paper?
Yeah, sure. I'll see if I can open one of those up. That was, again, I was sort of breaking out of my formula, and I had been collecting film strips, which I think you saw in the video. I've used some of those to hang in the gallery window, vintage film strips. I wanted to use some of those. I mean, it's probably obvious from looking at this that I'm in love with Dada and Man Ray, and so the idea of doing a photogram really appealed to me. And I found a technique where I could, like, here's Esther Williams, of course, repeated images of Esther Williams, where I could copy and reverse. They had to be sort of pretty contrasty images, but images from film, from movies, copy them on vellum or on, well, vellum seemed to work better for me, and actually place them on the paper in reverse. So this is actually a film strip that I've wound, laid on the paper, and the images of Esther Williams in reverse laid on the paper. So they're actual size, and it's a photogram. It's a unique photogram. I was sort of playing with different ways to communicate this idea and this feeling really more than anything.
We have another question. I'm curious about your use of color. What was your thought process for when to introduce color and when not to?
Oh God. Honestly, that was just very intuitive. I originally pictured these images in black and white, but occasionally when I would, and I think you could see in that image of my process for the Rocky image, when I would just shoot them, some of them purely in black and white, some of the objects specifically just sort of cried out to me to remain in color. And so, let's see if I can get this slideshow open again. Sorry for my technical issues here. But like in this one, it just didn't work to have that sort of sole object that I have in this one too, not to be in color. So it was very intuitive, and it was, I think, predominantly the sort of objects that I was inserting into the construction I was photographing.
Well, I think what that does on occasion is force this distinction for the viewer between the black and white medium that you're making your work about versus a medium you're making that work in. You know, like we could look at these and think, well, these are black and white photographs, but those little color elements remind us that these are color photographs of a black and white subject.
Yeah.
That's how I read it. Yvette has another question. Did you create any digital negatives for any of your images?
No. Well, digital negatives meaning, I guess I'm, Chris, you can help me there. A digital negative.
I would think of that like printing out a transparency to contact print.
No, I did not do that.
Doug has a question. Rocky seems like by far the most recent film represented. Since each of these images seem to represent something so personal, I'm surprised to not see more films that have been current when you were, say, a teen. What was this, or was that a specific choice?
To be honest, I was just always much more interested in classic cinema. That was my focus. Growing up, it was just a personal thing. Not to say that there weren't, that I wasn't into more contemporary stuff growing up. I was, but you were more likely to find me over the weekend having a Hitchcock marathon, or, you know, watching the original Cat People over the remake of Cat People and that sort of thing. So it was a personal, again, this is, even though this might not seem like a personal project, it feels very personal to me.
One thing I enjoy about it is how you, in most images, I find that there is some element that's repeated multiple times. Maybe it's not the exact element, like in the eyes, those are different eyes, but most of these have some kind of photographic element that's repeated, maybe twice, maybe 10 times. And for me, that maybe relates to the stroboscopic effect of the zoetrope or the projection happening in the theater, that we're constantly looking at, whether we realize it or not, at a motion picture, we're actually looking at many, many thousands of still images, but repeated at a very high rate. And I think these kind of reference that issue.
And that was the hope, really, was that, and of course, you know, I've since this project has been in my head, there's other artists who I think have done amazing work with this idea. I know Tacita Dean's project film is amazing, and also there's an artist that whose work that I'm familiar with called Marco Brambilla. I might be butchering his name, but that it's a very similar idea to my images here. And of course, I sort of had this idea before I saw his, but his is very 3D, and they're moving image tableaus, sort of these Baroque landscapes of film images. But yeah, I mean, the repetition, the sort of, I'm trying to get at that sort of, you know, 24 frames a second, the sort of repeated image is obviously, and again, the zoetrope.
We have another question. Since this is a concept that's been brewing for you for a while, I'm curious if there's an evolution across the pieces. or do you see them all hanging together as a static set?
I mean, I think there was, and I know I've talked about this, there was the evolution in terms of me sort of breaking out of the formula a bit when I broke out of the film strip pieces. Those were later when I did the photograms and the square image with the eyes. So yeah, I mean, in terms of that, I tend to get bored with a formula. So that was my, my biggest shift. But the main images of the long film strip, and there's sort of a, you'll notice that there's two that are sort of in a different dimension. There are these two, I think they're numbered 10 and 11. They were meant as a diptych, and these were actually probably the first I did. They were very Hitchcock sourced. So yeah, I mean, I started with the idea of the film strip and then moved on from there.
Hi, this is Jeff. Going back to Yvette's question, one of the things I wondered, and I think these are really great, is whether or not you had even considered using a scanner, composing some of your items on the scanner and then creating the photo that way.
You know, I've done that with other pieces. I do a lot of collage and I have done that, but with this, I really wanted that element of lighting and that bit of three-dimensionality to it. I found that the lighting really sort of added an element to me that looked much more cinematic. So yes, I have done that, but I prefer to light them myself.
Okay, thanks.
And Nelson had a question. How did you arrive at each construction? Were there some issues or themes you wanted to portray?
Oh God, well, with some of them maybe, but with most collage I do, well, this one is probably, maybe I'm trying to get at something there, but about manipulation of the female body in film. But really, it's highly intuitive. And I think that's one of the reasons I love collage, is just to take images that speak to me, play, see where they take me, see what happens sort of in this unconscious way. So majority of the time when I'm doing collage, it's a very unconscious process. And I arrive at connections sort of after it's happened.
I'm really struck by the way you wanted to be a projectionist as a child, because to me, I find these to look like this one looks like it's all about projection. Like the light could be projecting through that toy viewer thing, and that these are like sets that you're then projecting light on, and they are constructions that you then light. I don't know, I love that idea behind all of this work. It's not really a question, but I really think it's there.
Thank you. I still want to be a projectionist, by the way.
Well, I think you are one in just a different format, in a different format.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I had some friends say that they wanted to rehab an old theater, and I begged them. I said, if you need a projectionist, I don't know if there's still a union. I think there probably isn't, but at this point, with everything moving to digital in our sort of post-film world, yeah. I'm going to stop sharing finally. I think we've seen them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any other questions before we close out?
Did you get your MFA in photography?
No. Well, I actually decided to get my MFA. I ended up doing visual communication and design, and I felt kind of hemmed in. So I ended up going to the Art Institute knowing that I would be sort of allowed the freedom to play. And so I ended up doing kind of multimedia work in the end. So technically, no, it was not in photography, but I did a lot of photo-based work.
Doug, you got a question?
Yeah, I have one more question. Oddly enough, I did go to school for, for film. So I actually do have a film degree.
Think I did know that, Doug.
Yeah, so I very much appreciate all of your work. And it's, in some ways, it feels like a shame not to see the dioramas. Do you ever
I know everybody says that, and I wish I had more images of the dioramas, but I have to be honest with you, I hate them so much they don't, because when they're not lit and composed, I don't know. And so I would literally just pitch them. So I probably should, if I was going to be more thoughtful in the future, maybe reconstruct some of these, because I could do that for the viewer to sort of help to build more of an understanding of the images. But yeah, I really hate them.
No, I don't think of them so much as an understanding as like a piece of artwork in themselves.
Oh, and I understand, but I feel like my skill is not in the sort of Joseph Cornell. I've tried that and it doesn't work for me. I mean, I think as I grow older, maybe I'm getting a little better at that, but that sort of traditional hand skill, really refined, you know, cabinet of curiosity, little box thing. I've never been able to make those the way that I want them to be. So the photograph has definitely helped me.
So does this kind of put away the film obsession for you for now, or do you think that you'll move on and do something else next, or will you stay in that realm?
Yeah, I've definitely moved on. But I wouldn't say that my film obsession is over. I will say that having children has impacted it greatly, and I'm not able to consume films the way I used to. And then obviously the landscape of film has changed, and what really drew me to it has changed enough that I'm not as, you know, I mean, the whole landscape has changed. Just streaming and, you know, bringing the sort of computerized electronic element to film. Not that I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's just different. So this is sort of my...
Have you passed your love of cinema down to the kids?
Hey, Mike. I don't know. Hopefully, I'm trying. I think a little bit. No.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's, all of you for coming and hearing this lecture. And I hope if you haven't been by the gallery yet, you'll get by and see the work in person. It's really terrific.